Good afternoon. Welcome to the Labor Forum here on WRFG 89.3 FM. My name is Diane Mathowitz, and I'm a retired auto worker and one of the co-hosts of this program. And I want to welcome all our listeners who are tuned in on their radios, those that are listening on the stream at www.wrfg.org, and of course you who are tuned in on your mobile device. And a special hello to those who are watching on the Labor Forum YouTube channel. We have a great show today. We have a lot of folks here in the studio who have a lot of important information to pass along. So we'll get right into it. The opinions that are expressed on this program may not necessarily be those of the Board of Directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG. I do want to remind everyone that when you tune in next Monday, we will be in the first week of our fall pledge drive. This is absolutely critical to the life of WRFG. We are sustained both by your support, by the fact that you tune in and listen, but also by the fact that you contribute financially to keep us on the air. It is 41 years that the Atlanta community has done that, and we really encourage you to think about how you can support the station starting next Sunday night at midnight and going on for the next 3 weeks. So we'll start with our labor headlines for today. It is Monday, October 6th. And our news really are all follow-ups of things that we have presented to you in past shows. So we're going to start with a follow-up to the news of a strike by the French National Union of Airline Pilots, which we featured a few weeks ago. It was caused by the announced plan by management of Air France that it was transferring a significant number of flights to its budget subsidiary, and that goes by the name of Transvia, and investing $1.28 billion into that company. In addition, Air France said it would move other support elements outside of the country. Pilots who fly for Transvia get paid considerably less than those at Air France. They work more hours and they have less time off between flights. The Air France pilots struck for 14 days, costing the airline an estimated $350 million in losses. On September 28th, last week, the union called off the strike with the agreement that negotiations would continue on these pressing issues. The pilots' union came under vicious attack, not just by the French press and business class, but also by the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and media in the Netherlands and other European countries, who denounced the pilots as, quote, privileged and making too much money. The larger class struggle is over an effort to change French labor law to increase the work week, cut holidays, make it easier for bosses to lay workers off, and cut Social Security, family grants, and welfare payments. A blow to all French workers and their families that would transfer an estimated $70 billion a year out of workers' wages and into the boss's profits. Sounds pretty familiar. Last week we reported on a multi-million-dollar settlement reached by housekeepers at Boston's Hyatt hotels who lost their jobs to replacement workers paid $8 an hour. Their struggle had been taken up by Unite Here, a hospitality workers union that represents many Hyatt hotel employees around the country. The Boston victory followed an earlier successful campaign against the Hyatt chain in July of 2013, which saw the corporation finally accept a national agreement for all its unionized employees. That prompted workers in Long Beach and Emeryville, California, Greenwich, Connecticut, and Baltimore, Maryland to join the union. Hospitality workers often endure low pay, harsh and dangerous working conditions, management intimidation, and of course a lack of respect for the work they do. That is why another significant gain was achieved on September 14th when the Los Angeles City Council voted 12-3 to require big hotels with at least 300 rooms to pay $15.37 an hour minimum wage to their workers starting July of 2015. The measure expands to hotels with 150 rooms in 2016. In another move to raise the city's minimum wage to $15, the Los Angeles Workers' Assembly submitted a ballot initiative ordinance to have the voters decide. Statistics show that almost 50% of Los Angeles jobs are low wage. The Labor Forum will keep you up on the progress of that grassroots movement. And locally, the musicians of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra continue to be locked out since an agreement was not reached by September 6 when their contract expired. The head of the ASO board, Stanley Romanstein, who was also involved in the 2012 lockout, announced his resignation on September 29. Terry Neal, an ASO board member and retired Coca-Cola executive, was appointed as the interim president. The musicians, while not sorry to see Romanstein go, say the real decision makers in the issues impacting the contract negotiations are members of the Woodruff Arts Center Executive Committee. Public pressure is mounting for the lockout by management to be ended and good faith negotiations to start. And that's our Labor headlines for today, October 6th. We'll move right immediately into Paul McLennan, retired ATU member, and the This Week in Labor History that we look forward to every Monday.
Thanks, Diane. We're celebrating today on October 6th the birthday of Fannie Lou Hamer, who was born in 1917 in Montgomery County, Mississippi. She was the granddaughter of slaves. Her family were sharecroppers, a position not that different from slavery. Hamer had 19 brothers and sisters. She was the youngest of the children. Hamer began working the fields when she was only 6 years old. Around the age of 12, Hamer dropped out of school in order to work full-time and help out her family. She continued to be a sharecropper after her 1944 marriage to Perry Pap Hamer. The couple worked on a cotton plantation near Ruleville, Mississippi. They were unable to have children after Hamer had a surgery to remove a tumor. During the operation, her surgeon gave Hamer a hysterectomy without her consent. In August 1962, civil rights organizers came to Ruleville, Mississippi. When they asked who would be willing to go to the courthouse to register to vote, Fannie Lou Hamer put up her hand. This was the movement she had been searching for. She later said, when they asked for those to raise their hands who'd go down to the courthouse the next day, I raised mine, had it high up as I could get it. I guess if I had any sense, I'd have been a little scared, but what was the point of being scared? The only thing they could do to me was kill me, and it seemed like they've been trying to do that a little bit at a time ever since I could remember. According to a biography by Kay Mills, This Little Light of Mine, The Life of Fannie Lou Hamer, that decision changed her own destiny and that of a great many others, black and white. This Little Light of Mine was a special favorite song of hers. It became an anthem of the movement, and it symbolizes the message that everyone has some part to play in the struggle for freedom and liberation. Kay Mills continues, she would lose her job, be jailed and beaten for her beliefs. She symbolized one aspect of what the movement hoped to accomplish, to embolden local people to resist a harsh and violent system. From this humblest of beginnings, Mrs. Hamer would go on to challenge the President of the United States, the National Democratic Party, members of Congress, and the American people about fulfilling the promises of democracy. When Hamer and others went to the courthouse to register, they were jailed and beaten by the police. Hamer's courageous act got her thrown off the plantation where she was a sharecropper. She also began to receive constant death threats and was even shot at. Still, Hamer would not be discouraged. She became a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee field secretary and traveled around the country speaking and registering people to vote. Hamer co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. In the summer of 1964 in Atlantic City, the Freedom Democratic Party challenged the all-white Mississippi delegation to the Democratic National Convention. Hamer spoke in front of the Credentials Committee in a televised proceeding that reached millions of viewers. She told the committee how African Americans in many states across the country were prevented from voting through illegal tests, taxes, and intimidation. The Freedom Democrats represented a challenge to Johnson, who was seeking the Democratic Party's nomination for re-election. If the Mississippi Freedom Party was successful, it would mean that other Southern delegations would publicly break from the convention's decision to nominate Johnson, meaning that he would almost certainly lose those states' electoral votes in the election. So in Washington, D.C., President Johnson, fearful of the power of Hamer's testimony on live television, called an emergency press conference in an effort to divert press coverage. The television networks switched to the White House from their coverage of Hamer's address. When the Democratic National Committee offered a compromise to seat 2 delegates of the more than 60 sent by the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, she said, "We didn't come for no 2 seats when all of us is tired." On March 14, 1977, Fannie Lou Hamer died. In the very end, her heart failed. The only time it ever did, Kay Mills writes. Fannie Lou Hamer held her light over some of the dark places in the American soul. She recognized that a web of power had been woven to keep some people up and some people down. She worked to make people recognize that web, and she tried to sweep it away, to create a fairer balance in society so that people for whom and among whom she worked might someday be able to say that they were no longer sick and tired of being sick and tired. That was her lament in life, and those are the words on her tombstone in a dusty, weedy field in Ruleville. They remind us of her history and her mission, the latter is yet unfulfilled. Someday, we must believe, commitment will again override fear. Her final resting place was the Freedom Farms Cooperative, a place she helped to create.
Thank you very much, Paul, and I want to remind our listeners that today is the last day if you are not registered to vote. You have, I guess, until midnight. You can do it online. I know there are many places around the city where people are registering as well. So having just heard about Fannie Lou Hamer and this struggle, it's something that all of us need to take to heart, that there is this one method among many methods for us to make change. So we're going to move now. We have, as I said, we have several guests in the studio, and we wanted to invite Curtis Howard, who's president of the Transit Workers Union, that are the workers that operate the MARTA system, to come on air today because there are a lot of concerns around MARTA, the contract that is trying to be negotiated and hasn't been negotiated. So welcome, Curtis. You've been here on the program before, and we're happy you're back.
Thank you for having me this evening.
And then we have another MARTA worker here, Mrs. Stanley Smalls. Hi, Stanley.
Hello.
And I know this is your first time. We hope you'll come back again. So I understand you drive a mobility van?
Yes, I do.
Great. All right, so let's just get into it. What's going on with MARTA?
Well, we've been without a contract for a year and a half now, and yeah, and nothing put on the table worth really for the workers to accept. More of the same with MARTA, take, and when MARTA's in one of the best positions it's been in a while, it's not trying to do anything economically for the workers. So I think that's very important that when times are good, the workers need to have economic justice. And so we're here today just to tell our story and hope that we can tell it in a way that people would follow our story.
I know you had a rally just a couple hours ago. You're fresh off of it. Could you describe what and why?
Yes, we had a rally today at Robbie Ash, which is the MARTA board chairman, at his office downtown Atlanta. And 2 things we were protesting about. We want a fair and decent contract, and then we want them not to privatize the mobility service and all of the other disciplines that they are trying to outsource, which are equal about maybe 1,000 or better workers. So that is very critical when you start talking about privatizing a public agency.
Well, I'm going to get to Stanley right now because you're obviously one of the workers who will be impacted if this move to privatize comes through, but it goes right back to this strike that we were talking about in France. It wasn't privatizing, but it was essentially taking jobs to a subsidiary that would pay way less and wouldn't have the same benefits. So can somebody, either one of you, maybe Stanley, talk about what this means if MARTA was able to succeed in privatizing the mobility service, but any of the job operations we're talking about?
Well,
I'll
I'll
start
start.
with Curtis.
I'll start, and then I'll let him come in. Well, for mobility especially, it's the disability community will get less service, less customer service, and less service. The vehicles, of course, would not be maintained correctly, and the service actually goes down. For the workers, they get they don't have the same benefits, which is a pension plan, which MARTA has an excellent pension plan for the represented workers. We're 121% funded right now, and there's no need to take any worker out of that plan. And then private sector always increases the healthcare premiums for their workers. So now where we have decent wages and things of that nature, that premiums for the healthcare will go up and no 401k.
Do you have a question, Paul?
The question I had, in 1916, this union was started, so we're coming up very soon on the 100th anniversary of our local. And I was wondering if Curtis or Stanley could speak a little about why this union is so important to this community.
I mean, things like today. I mean, that in itself speaks a lot. What we was able to do today, what we have done in the past, and it's just the transit union. I mean, we go out, we engage the public, and we teach our operators or union members to stick close to the public and stick close to your union.
I should ask you, how long have you been a MARTA work driver?
4 years.
4 years.
Yes.
So,
Can I add something?
sure, go ahead.
I think, Paul,
It's open.
what's very important to know is that we're public servants, right? And so we serve the public. And I think that we have and build relationships with the riders. Every day we transport somebody, you see them over and over again. You believe, I mean, you build a sense of trust together. And, they feel comfortable and good. And we know that we're going to go right back out there every day. And it's a good feeling when you're doing something that's positive.
Well, I wanted to ask this bigger question. So obviously when MARTA got started, and MARTA has been plagued essentially by government entities that really are anti-public mass transportation, let's be clear.
Yes.
The first MARTA vote, essentially the original plan had been for MARTA to extend all throughout Metro Atlanta, all the counties, but only the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, and DeKalb, when it went to the vote, approved the 1% sales tax that funds MARTA. And then, of course, you had the legislature getting in on it by trying to tell MARTA how it spends its money and mandating a 50-50 split on operations and expansion. So, in both of your opinions, I mean, what is it, or why is it, I mean, I have a reason why these people do this, but what is it or why is it that you think that this legislature and these elected officials in what certainly 40 years ago when MARTA started were pretty much all white communities and much more prosperous. What is it that has kept them to be so, what's the word, short-sighted, I'll use a nice word, short-sighted in derailing the possibility of people having access to public transit?
I think it's very clear. It's greed. It's federal dollars and public state and local dollars that come out of taxpayers' money, they want their hands on the money. Keith Parker is the CEO of MARTA. He's the second highest paid almost in the transit agency, transit industry, excuse me, public transit industry. And so therefore, very much like anybody else, private sector wants their hands on the federal money and the local money just for profit. They don't want to give public transit the way it needs to be. And that's why MARTA years ago was originally taken over, right? It was taken over from a private company because they wouldn't keep it up. They wouldn't do the maintenance of it. They didn't keep it up. They ran it to the ground and, took everything and put it in their pocket. So it came up with, we have to get involved in the federal government, sends federal dollars down, and now they want to turn around history 50 years ago and now turn it back right to profit and run it to the ground.
Okay, so that's the reason why the privatization move is on.
Right.
My question, I want to get to a certain place.
Okay.
My question is about the motivation of elected officials, whether in the state legislature or in local county offices, rejecting the idea of public transit. I know Paul and I have an opinion.
Well,
Okay, I'm gonna say it. RACISM, racism. That to me has been the kicker here about public transit. I was reading today's Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and we have a vote coming up in Clayton County about expanding MARTA, and the Clayton County people, paying a 1% sales tax in order to bring public transit to Clayton, which has such a high unemployment, high foreclosure. People are just so transit poor there. And in the course of the article, one of the people talked about how, well, they just didn't want anybody to be able to come to Clayton County. I just sort of feel that was it 40 years ago. There's silence here in the studio.
no, I think I don't think I can say it better. I think that it's racism all over. But what's funny in this metro area is a lot of it is black on black, and that hasn't been talked about a lot. For me, we understand that certain people don't want black folks to come in your town. They say, well, property tax goes down, which is not true.
Property value.
Property value, and property value really increases when public transit comes. So that's the first thing. That's an educational piece right there, right? And then secondly, they think crime statistics go up, and actually that's not true. So transit has nothing to do with attaching crime to it. But I think in the metro area now we're even talking about black on black racism, because I always hear people say, well, your drivers and the community that you're bringing out is black, but the community that's going to vote is mostly black. So it's a turn from maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago when the first MARTA Act came out. But it's, to me, it's just ridiculous. We all pay taxes. We all have a civil right to public transit, and that's everybody. That's no particular race, color, religion, or anybody. Everybody has a right to public transportation.
I have a question about the state, and going back to the contract for a minute. Have labor relations gotten worse with the new general manager? What is the state of the relationship between the union and management right now in terms of trying to come to a fair and reasonable agreement?
You did tell me no cursing, so I will watch it. No, actually, labor relations is at an all-time low. Our grievance and arbitration system is backed up. The communication backed up internally with employees is all backed up. They play this weight game and this control and power game, not about working things out anymore at all. And it's the same type of activities at the table. It's about take and power and control. And we're just not willing to give that either three of them up.
And the ironic thing to me is that being a public system and people in Fulton, DeKalb, and the city of Atlanta are paying taxes to people who are being paid. For example, as I understand it, MARTA hired an outside consultant with public money that they get to run the system to fight the union with.
Paul, you couldn't have said it better. And this gentleman that they hired, first of all, in the history of MARTA, they've never hired anybody to do outside to negotiate the labor agreement. That's what taxpayers pay the labor relations person for. So currently, you're absolutely right. They hired this gentleman. He's from Texas, and he has NLRB charges on him right now, of the point of $1.3 million that the NLRB has taken a claim on. So now we're spending, like you said, taxpayers' money, but some of the taxpayers are represented employees. So they've hired a man to come in and negotiate against workers when they pay the taxes as well.
We're part of the community too.
We're part of the community as well. The majority of our members live in DeKalb and Fulton County. So we're just as much part of the community as anybody else.
Well, we're almost up on time for this segment, but we'll have both Stanley and Curtis joining us for the next one from 4:30. So if there's people out there who want to get more up-to-date info, be kept in touch, is there some information for the ATU Local?
Oh, absolutely. You can follow us on our Facebook page at ATU Local 732. And you can also follow us on our website, which is www.atu732.org.
Okay, listeners, we're going to take a short break with some announcements from the radio station WRFG, and we will be back with our two guests that are here now, but we're also going to be joined by Ken Mitchell, who is with Concerned Transit Riders for Equal Access. So please stay tuned. Welcome back to the second part of the Labor Forum here on WRFG 89.3 FM, your community radio station and source of progressive information. We've now been joined by, as I said, Ken Mitchell. He is with the Concerned Transit Riders for Equal Access. Welcome, Ken.
Welcome. How you doing?
And we still have Stanley here. We still have Curtis here, Paul and me. And we wanted to have a more general conversation now about really what Curtis ended up with, which is that everybody has a right to access to transportation, access to mobility, access to be able to get to jobs, to schools, to cultural events, to visit family, to go to wherever you want to go. So Ken, if you wouldn't mind starting off with telling our listeners a little bit about the organization that you represent, because you seem to be a very vital component of this next discussion.
Yes, Concerned Transit Riders for Equal Access is an organization about consumers that are a coalition of different organizations that participate in public transportation. We also advocate access. Our statement is to inform, educate, and advocate for accessible transportation.
And our listeners should know that you have been accompanied by a seeing eye dog, and that she's doing really good here in the studio.
His name's Jesse.
Jesse is doing good. So, this particular issue of the possibility, is it a direct proposal of MARTA to privatize, or is this just sort of like one of those rumors that floats around, or is this something they've actually said?
I can't say that MARTA has actually said it because they don't talk to me as often as I'd like. However, I could say one thing is that I guess there's a reason why they call it public transportation and not private transportation. The other thing, I was listening to President Curtis talk about access and stuff in the past, and he did mention the fact that this is something that's not new. It's something that has been tried before and something that has failed before. He also mentioned that we have a right to accessible transportation. And that's everybody, not just individual people. And the last thing I heard him mention was about the service. And that's one thing I guess we have to understand is transportation a service or is it a business? If it's a service, then we would never talk about some other services that should be privatized. We would not be talking about the police station to be privatized. We would not be talking about the fire department to be privatized. And maybe they're talking a little bit about the post office to be privatized. But it's also, it's a service. The police department is not there to make money, the fire department is not there to make money, and the public transportation system is not there to, quote, make money.
So Curtis, can you make your way to a microphone and answer that question whether or not MARTA has actually said this is their intent? Or is it just because this is kind of the trend that's happening everywhere?
Great question. Great question. MARTA has said this is the way they're going to go. This is, we're going to follow this KPMG report. And KPMG is a company right now that is in some really big trouble about their reporting and how their, their documentation and their reports that they put out for their clients. But the interesting part and the reason why I wanted to jump back to the mic is last week they tried to slide it in by not properly posting it on their website that they were going to vote for the mobility to be outsourced, the RFP to hit the street. And
Explain what an RFP is.
Request for proposals from from private sector vendors. And so when I recognized it that night before, I started making all kind of calls and everything, and we got them to pull it back. But the only reason why they pulled it back is because we put a lot of pressure on them, and they didn't notify the public. MARTA does not want the public informed about the things that they're doing. And the community must get involved and recognize that they have say-so over what happens to their transit system here in Atlanta, and not some folks that come in and get a job like Keith Parker and them, and for 3 or 4 years stay, and then they hit the road and tear up our transit system. At the end of the day, this is our transit system, and it belongs to the community, and we need to fight them back for everything that they're trying to do.
Stanley, could you talk a little about the problems that mobility workers face just trying to do their job and serve the community?
We face several problems. One of the things we face is traffic. Then it's, like President Howard alluded to, privatization. That's in the back of everybody's mind. Every day we come to work. Is today the day, or is this, or is that? But we face a big scheduling problem, and I'm pretty sure Ken been riding the service longer than I've been driving, and he could attest to that. We have always had a scheduling problem in our mobility department that MARTA is just now acknowledging, and they just want operators to take blame with their scheduling problem and not acknowledge the fact that ridership has come up. Ridership has come up a lot, and they're putting operators in a very unsafe situation by compressing these manifests together and having them ripping and running all over town, and refuse to listen to the operators who actually know the city better than anybody. There's one thing that ATU do chant: "Who moved the city? We moved the city." Not only is that a chant, that's a reality. I often joke with President Howard, "Let me drive. I'm the mobility operator. I know the city better than anybody."
Ken, can you describe how it feels from the rider's side in terms of the problems they experience with the system, with mobility?
There's no doubt that scheduling is definitely an issue with riders as well as operators, and I'm assuming as well as administration. It's become a standard that on-time performance is going to be late, which is against everything as far as in kind of a scheduling. If you're already going to know that you're going to be late half an hour, or not show up at all, it kind of makes it difficult to schedule a particular thing for church, friends, work, or whatever. And last is that if you, as a writer, I'm guaranteed that at least once a week, that if I'm working, that I'm going to be late. And that's something that even MARTA will even attest to it and will not argue with.
Would both of you answer or talk about this question in terms of, my sense of it is from being around this issue for a few years, is that between the workers and the riders, all the problems with MARTA mobility could be solved.
Absolutely. I'm first and foremost, I think one of the biggest problems you have in the mobility department alone is when you have people in charge of mobility that has never driven mobility van. So they make decisions on the day-to-day operations and never driven a van and refuse to come out and look at the inside of a van. And I honestly, me and Ken had this conversation before. I do think that we need to have somebody in our mobility department that's actually have a real connection with the disability community. So, you know, when you have the operators, you have the people from the disabled community, well, you can better provide a service because they understand their conditions and we understand the streets. And when you put those two together, you got two people that want to work together and make the city better and service better. You'll have a wonderful thing. And this is something that me and Ken have multiple conversations about. I've actually went to some of the MARTA management and spoke to them about it, and it just, as always, and I'm pretty sure everybody here, even President Howard, could attest to, good ideas always get swept under the carpet and pushed to the back.
And Ken, what's your vision that I know you've mentioned before about how this service could be run?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is that in the past, MARTA has not used all of its tools. For instance, it hasn't had the operators' input, and I mean input where it actually has some effect. They have may have had input as far as advisory, as far as I know. I know they haven't had the input of the riders because they use the riders as supposedly as an advisory committee, but that's a whole other issue, I would say. So one of the things that I work with is independent living. We believe that at least we are the least experts in our own lives, and I can guarantee that there's nobody knows more about accessibility with vehicles than somebody who uses the accessibility with vehicles. For instance, there's nobody in the city of Atlanta that knows more about the sidewalks, the elevators, the streets than a person who uses a wheelchair. Which streets are not good to use, which streets you should go to, which elevators you should use. And that's a lot of experience and a great tool to use. So, if we have operators that know a lot about the vans, a lot about the streets, a lot about the maintenance, we have consumers that know a lot about the streets, a lot about the rides, a lot about the routes. Why aren't we using all of our tools? Why are we just using administration that I'm assuming knows a lot about the numbers, I'll say?
If we could, I'd like to talk a little bit more about this concept that there are certain rights that people have. For example, I think people have a right to a job, a right to education, a right to health care, a right to clean environment, a right to transportation, a right to culture. And these are all things that are actually in something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I know we had a little piece about how the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra is been locked out by management. Oh, the same sort of issues, cutbacks, big cuts in their pay, etc. And so we see literally every kind of worker, cultural workers, transportation workers, fast food workers, airline workers, all over, being faced with this same sort of notion that these rights to a decent life, actually a fulfilling life, let's not just go decent, a fulfilling life, are always under attack, and the main reason usually is that it's not profitable to provide whatever. So in the whole stream of things, in the whole picture of things, I think that obviously if we don't have decent transportation, meaning that people have really fast, safe, efficient ways to get around, it impacts everything of those other rights that I talked about. You know, if it takes you 4 hours or 3 hours and however many buses and a train and whatever to get to work, to get to a doctor, to get to school, these are all big issues that narrow the possibility of an individual's life. So I'd like all three of you, because you're engaged in this issue, to talk about it either personally or how you feel about how absolutely critical it is that this whole community, all communities, fight for this right of accessible, affordable, efficient, safe transportation.
Well, I know one thing for me being a driver, and like it was said earlier, we do build connections. We're stuck in traffic with them. So we have no choice but to communicate with each other, and we actually build these great relationships with each other. And one of the things that hit home is when you hear, when you picking up somebody going to the doctor, or you picking them up from the doctor, and you be like, well, are you going to work today? No, I lost my job because the bus kept getting me late to work. So you start, as a driver, you start to take that personal, or when you hear passengers say, I'm on probation at work because I'm constantly getting there late. It's just like, what can I do? Who can I call? What can I do? How can I help you? What can I go back and say? Who phone number I could give you? Because we all in this together, and I feel like, if I know something, I need to try anything I can do to help you sustain your job, and unfortunately that's the reality of it. And it's sad that people sit in the office that make these decisions don't understand some of your decisions are really impacting people's lives, and lives of very good people that, we can't get a bus there on time, and we got 3 buses sitting on this side of town doing anything, and when we try to tell you, well, don't tell us, call us back and we'll do this, or don't call us for 2 hours. We try to tell you these things, and we telling you because you're about to impact. They're passengers to the people in the office. They're friends to us. They're family to us, and neighbors and stuff like that. So we become overly passionate to the point, like, sometimes you have some operators that me myself, I've done it. I've actually said, I deviated from my route. I said, look, this is the best interest of the service, and I went and did what I felt in my heart was right, and that's the only thing I could go by.
Ken, did you want to comment on that
Mine's
long statement I made?
Mine is kind of something I thought about too long, I guess. Oh, I guess I shouldn't say too long. Well, so one of the things that I always say about those rights is that we were given those rights by our Creator. It was reinforced by the Constitution. Certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It was also reaffirmed in the Americans with Disability Act. Hopefully in the Convention for Rights of People with Disabilities, etc. And we wouldn't be talking about accessibility rights or driving rights if it was, for instance, if we said, well, we're going to close down all the roads in Georgia, or we're going to now have all the Hartsfield Airport will not, you can't use that anymore. We'd have an outrage. And just to find out how important the public transportation system is in Metro Atlanta, just think, if we decided to close it down, you know what? We're not going to have MARTA anymore. There would be an outrage. But that's exactly what happens with people with disabilities who have to use the MARTA mobility system. If it's decided to be privatized, then that's what happens for people with disabilities, is that now, instead of a service, it's a business. Instead of, like our police department would say, if it was privatized, it's, well, how does this make money for the police department, or is it a particular service? That's the same thing with mobility, is that, or public transportation, is that it no longer becomes a service, it no longer becomes a right, it becomes a privilege for people who can actually pay for it.
And so my input would be everything we talked about earlier, which was social and economic justice, right? And that's both ways, for the community as well as the workers, right? Workers come and we come to earn a decent living, to live in decent communities. And so economic justice is for both the community and the worker, and we should be partnering together to fight for that economic justice here in the city of Atlanta and the metro counties. And it doesn't make a difference what side you're on, whether you're community or worker. It is our right, as you said, economically, and justice should prevail all the time. We just have to step up together and fight for it.
Well, I guess I'll kind of segue off of that. So there are people out there listening. Some of them may be in their cars. Some of them may still be at work or at home. So the question really is how to get this information out. We certainly are trying here on the Labor Forum to assist in that. But what are the ways that either of your organizations, the union, the organizations you're with can, in trying to really not just explain to people what's happening, but also to really motivate and have people understand, as we said with the Fannie Lou Hamer piece, that everybody has a way to make something better. Everybody does. So are there petitions, are there meetings people can go to, are there phone calls that would be helpful? I'll start with you, Curtis. Is there some way that ATU is encouraging both riders and the community as a whole? Even if you don't use MARTA on a daily basis or a regular basis, you certainly understand the value of it.
Right. So yes, once I would like to say that we're running an ad about mobility, and if we can, we'd like to talk to you about running it here as a commercial as well. And second of all, yes, we would like anybody that can call down and talk to the commissioners of Fulton County and DeKalb County. And actually DeKalb County, Ms. Butler just stepped down, so there's a vacant seat. So we need to push to make sure that we have a community person on the MARTA board, not somebody, as Ken alluded to, and I like the way he said it, somebody who, you know, is for working class people, community folks. I think he said it very well. And so that's a goal. We need to get together and ask DeKalb County to put the right person on the MARTA board. And then the mayor, Kasim Reed, has appointment power as well, and he has 3 seats on the board. And we just need to reach out to him and ask him to make sure that his appointees as well are voting in the best interest and in favor of the community. As Kim said, not run it as a business, but as a service.
So Stanley and Ken, before I go to you on that same question, maybe Curtis, if you would explain the composition of the MARTA board, because I don't know that everybody even understands who these people are who are the board that supposedly tell the manager, Mr. Parker, what to do, who they are and where they come from.
Right. So the MARTA board is set up of DeKalb County. They have 3 appointees. The city of Atlanta, they have 3 appointees. And Fulton County, being the biggest county, has 4 appointees on the board. They're appointed by the commissioners out of DeKalb and Fulton, and out of the city of Atlanta, the mayor makes those appointments.
But aren't there representatives from the counties that don't have MARTA?
Yeah, but they don't have a vote.
Oh, they don't have a vote.
They don't have a vote.
Okay,
They just
thank
sit
you.
there and get information and pass it on to the good old governor.
Gotcha. All right, so the same question, I'll go next to you, Ken, in terms of how is it that your organization works to let people know about this, mobilize people? You know, what is it that you would advise our listeners if they want to weigh in on this that they could do?
Well, my first thing would be, just as Stanley said, to contact your representatives from your particular county or city of Atlanta, DeKalb County, Fulton County. You can do that by your commissioner. The second part I would encourage is that you could contact Concerned Transfer Riders for Equal Access, either by email, which would be crta@yahoo.com, or you contact them at Disability Link at 1901 Montreal Road in Tucker, or you could call 404-687-8890. And there's a number of ways that we would ask you to advocate or educate for acceptable transportation.
Stanley, did you have any ideas about that question, about how we can really, I don't know, elevate the issue of public transit? And again, not just to the people who necessarily ride it every day, but the whole community needs to, as we have said, understand the critical role that public mass transit plays.
A few ways. Well, one, you know, me and Ken, since we met, we stayed partner at the hip. And we work side by side, meet with his group, he come meet with ATU, and we discuss the issues and how can we further this. Also, just like the president alluded to earlier, our social media page, which is ATU Local 732 at Facebook, the Instagram page, which is ATU Local 732 at Instagram, and ATU732.org. And just talk to any and everybody. You never know who has a valued interest in paratransit or transit period unless you just talk to people. Today was just, when we was out there, people were just, hey, what's going on? What's happening? And when you just start talking about they want to do this to transit, people are like, what? No, they can't. That's not right. That's not theirs to do it. So the more people you talk, the more people you get on your side. And like I said, talk to us on the social media. And we'll definitely keep you engaged.
And Curtis, you want to have another idea?
Yeah, just closing out that we have been passing out literature.
I was just going to ask that. Can you pass out leaflets?
Yes, we've been passing out leaflets, and if anybody wants to have access to those leaflets, if they would just call our office at 404-223-5122, and we will make sure that we get those pamphlets and education out in your community.
I'll ask just a final question. You mentioned that potentially 1,000 jobs might be at risk if MARTA were to privatize. What are the other things that they might be thinking about doing this to?
Okay, so to start with mobility, it's supposed to go to the service workers, which are the folks that clean the stations and the buses. It would go to the IT department, which is our telephone group, who maintains our internal telephones. It will be customer service group, the call center, where you call in. So I really believe that that's the worst thing to do, is take a real person and put a telephone to
One of
answer your
those crazy
question.
machines that drives you
Yes.
just nuts.
So
Push one.
Yeah. So,
You want to throw that phone out the window.
So that takes away from what Ken says, you know, to be business then and not service. That's not good. That's not good customer service at all. And we've seen that with AT&T. Everybody knows what happened to AT&T, and when you call in, you press this and press that, and you get nowhere. And then they ask you the same questions when you get to a live person. So you just wasted 5 minutes of that. So absolutely, those are the other areas, and it will continue to happen. And we those are the critical areas of service. And I just have to reiterate that Ken did a great job of saying it. It's a service, not a business.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for being here today. So listeners, you have been hearing the voice and the opinions and the good advice of Curtis Howard, who is president of the ATU Local 732. Also, Ken Mitchell. He is with Concerned Transit Riders for Equal Access. And of course, we heard Stanley Smalls, who is one of the mobility drivers. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming in. We really appreciate it a lot.
Thank you for having us.
And so please tune in again next Monday. And as I reminded you, we will be asking for your financial support so that we can continue this kind of information that we deliver here on the Labor Forum, and of course the great music and the many other programs that are on WRFG that give you information, culture, opinions and views that just are not to be found on commercial for-profit media. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks to everyone here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll
for
be back again next Monday.